Hello, everybody. Welcome back to Slow Your Roll. I'm Cody, and I wanted to do something a little bit different. We are going to be doing a little series that is just reading short stories. Most of these short stories will likely be influenced and strongly inspired by the events of our West Marches campaign that we're doing. We'll be just doing kind of like a voiceover of some of the characters with that too. And me and Alex and maybe even other people in the future will be involved with doing the voices for dialogue. And yeah, it'll just be an interesting thing. So it's going to be a lot more relaxing, a little bit low energy. And in fact, after this little intro, I'll probably just do like a little black screen and we'll just get into this thing. You know what I mean? Save your battery life and take a nap easier. So light a candle, get a nice cup of coffee, take a nap, blow your candle out first. If you're taking a nap, don't be a fool, okay? Anyway, let's do this thing. This first short story is called The Untold Stories of Enza. It is largely inspired, but not completely accurate, but very inspired by the capital city of our West Marches game called Enza. And this is a bit of what happened before the West March game. So here we go. Ashes of Arendor. Prelude, before the siege. The city of Enza had always stood apart, cradled by the high ridges of the Ilarian Reach and fed by the twin rivers of Vine and Solmar. It was a jewel of a civilization in a world often defined by conflict. Its towers gleamed white and gold under the midday sun, and its markets buzzed with the languages of dozens of nations. For centuries, Enza had been a crossroads of knowledge, trade, and diplomacy, a place where scholars walked beside soldiers and where magic was not feared but taught and tempered. But all that had changed when the Blight came east. It began with silence. The towns beyond the green roads stopped sending messages. Then, merchants spoke of withered fields and haunted skies. Refugees poured into Enza with tales of walking corpses and black banners flying from desecrated towers. The name Vitrix crept into whispers like a sickness. A sorcerer of ancient legend, thought buried beneath the Dreadspire long ago. But the Dreadspire had cracked open, and something had come out. Within months, the lowlands fell. Enza became a bulwark, a wall between the decaying west and the still-living heart of Arendor. The Radiant Vanguard, Enza's elite defenders, called every banner home. Paladins returned from distant crusades. Mage knights left their posts along the Flame Watch. Even the Emberwings, living phoenix messengers bound by arcane scrolls, were recalled from international routes to serve solely within Enza's borders. But Vitrix did not march blindly. She advanced with terrifying precision, raising every village she touched into a fresh legion of the dead. Her magic corrupted earth and sky. Her champions rode bone chariots pulled by spectral beasts. Scouts who glimpsed her claimed she wore a crown of thorns grown into her skull, and that she never spoke, only watched. Aetos, the Ancient, archmage and spiritual leader of Enza, studied her progress with growing dread. No spell could scry her directly, no ward could hold her long. For every victory, 10 more shadows followed. She was not a general, she was an extinction. Even the bravest began to lose hope. Aetos himself, once seen as untouchable, grew thinner, quiet. His apprentices spoke in hushed tones of the ritual he was crafting, a spell so vast and old that even the stars did not remember it. The city prepared for its last stand. Citizens who could not fight were moved toward the inner districts. The outer walls were reinforced with alchemical steel. Beacon runes flared day and night. The Vanguard trained in shifts, never sleeping more than 4 hours at a time. And still, the sky darkened. The day before the siege, a false moon rose, green and veined like marble, and hung in the western sky where the sun should have been. Birds stopped singing, magic flickered, and from the high balcony of the Aurelian spire, Aetos watched it all in silence. Then he turned, closed his great tome, and whispered, "It is time." Ashes of Arendor, Part 1, The Siege of Enza. The bells of Enza rang like a dirge, not for celebration or ceremony, but alarm, a deep, rolling toll that echoed through the stone ribs of the city, as if the city itself mourned. Flames licked the sky in the western quarter, casting twisted shadows across crumbling rooftops. Beyond the shattered walls, a black tide surged. Skeletal warriors, rotting hounds, and phantom wraiths, all under the banner of Vitrix the Decayer. Her forces poured from the festering heart of Dreadspire, a monolith of bone and iron that had crawled ever closer for weeks. Now they were at the gates. At the city's heart, atop the Aurelian spire, stood Archmage Aetos the Ancient, draped in gold-stitched robes that shimmered despite the darkened sky. His hands trembled as he traced the runes of radiant power in the air. Each stroke pulled from him years he could no longer spare. Far below, the Radiant Vanguard held the line, paladins with shields of sunlight, pyromancers unleashing sweeping arcs of flame, archers atop parapets loosing volleys blessed by clerics, their arrows glowing like comets, and still the undead came.
"Hold!"
Captain Ress barked, her voice hoarse but unbroken. She drove her spire into the chest of the ghoulish brute, then spun to block a skeleton's rusted blade. Her armor was dented and scorched, her white tabard soaked in blood. Some hers, most not. They were outnumbered tenfold. Every street was a battlefield, every home a barricade. And through it all, the sky bled green, the aurora of death that preceded Vitrix herself. Aetos watched it rise and sighed. He had delayed this moment as long as he could. A full-scale evacuation had been impossible. Enza was too vast, its citizens too many, and Vitrix had been too swift. In the quiet chamber beneath the towers, Aetos whispered the names of his apprentices. Gone now, devoured in the first wave. He whispered the name of his daughter, Illyra, whose grave stood beneath the moonroot tree. He whispered the name of Arendor, not as a nation, but as a home. Then he turned to the heart of the spire, the cradle of stars, a crystal chamber built for last resorts. The runes he had woven over decades now pulsed in a slow, painful rhythm. A circle of 12 mirrors surrounded a single obsidian orb. "I am the fulcrum," he said. "Let Enza be the flame that flickers, but does not die." He stepped into the center. His body shimmered as he began the incantation. One by one, the mirrors ignited, casting beams of golden light into the orb. The spire trembled. The winds howled. Magic, real magic, not the kind taught in schools, crackled across the sky like lightning. In the streets below, Ress looked up. The clouds above the spire churned and parted. For a single breath, the sky turned white. Then the world convulsed. A shockwave of radiant force exploded outward, vaporizing undead in a 10-block radius. The front lines of the Decayer's horde disintegrated, their bones scattering like dry leaves. But the wave kept going, reaching beyond the enemy, beyond the walls, and beyond the world. From the outer districts, people screamed. The sky split open, revealing not stars, but possibilities. A kaleidoscope of foreign suns, dead moons, and drifting continents loomed where once only clouds hung. The city shook, not with tremors of collapse, but of movement. A weightless silence fell across Enza. Captain Ress stumbled as the ground beneath her feet became unmoored. The air turned thin. A column of gold fire erupted from the spire, engulfing the city like a dome. Inside, the people of Enza clung to stone, to each other, to hope. A final scream echoed through the city, not of fear, but of resolve. Aetos' voice, magnified by magic, rang in every mind. "Forgive me." Then the light consumed everything. Ashes of Arendor, Part 2, The Severing. There was no sensation of flight, no rush of air, no fall, no scream, only silence, and then a heartbeat. A distant thump, not from a single chest, but from the city itself. As if Enza were alive, and this was its first breath in a new world. The light had consumed everything, faded by degrees, peeling away like mist in morning sun. The spire stood still. The tower still pierced the sky. Streets, homes, marketplaces, all were intact, yet nothing was the same. Captain Ress rose shakily from her knees, her armor dimmed, her weapon forgotten in the dust. Around her, the remains of her vanguard blinked against an unfamiliar light. The sky above was no longer storm-racked and black, but wrong. Hazy ochre clouds drifted across the sky of deep cerulean, lit by a swollen sun and two fractured moons, one red, one silver, both pocked with cracks like broken porcelain. The air was heavier, filled with strange scents, blooming ash flowers, salt stone, and ozone. The wind carried whispers that made no sense, fragments of languages that had no tongue. All around them, the outer walls of the city had shifted. What once bordered farmland and forest now faced a vast, surreal wilderness. Crystalline trees with translucent leaves swayed on distant ridges. A river flowed against gravity along the edge of the shattered cliff. Towering mushrooms the height of minarets glowed faintly with bioluminescence. The horizon itself bent upward as though wrapped around some unseen sphere. And Enza was an island in a sea of broken worlds. From the top of the spire, an ember wing erupted, a phoenix of living flame. It arced across the sky, trailed by a dozen more, casting ribbons of firelight through the alien atmosphere. Their shrill cries, once a symbol of triumph, now sounded like mourning songs. The dome of golden magic that had shielded the city slowly receded, dissolving into flecks of starlight. Where it vanished, the foreign air rushed in like a tide. Ress coughed, tasting iron and spice on her tongue. She turned to her second-in-command, a younger paladin named Fennec.
Report!
"We're all here," Fennec said, blinking. "I think the city, we moved. Gods help me. I think we moved." Ress nodded slowly.
Check for breaches. Get the civilians off the streets. Get the healer circles working. I want full head counts by nightfall.
He hesitated. "Captain, where's the Archmage?" Ress looked up. The Aurelian spire was intact, but at its peaks, the Cradle of Stars was dark. The radiant light that had danced there for decades was gone. Where Aetos once stood, there was now only a burnt circle of ash and glass with a single flickering rune etched into the floor, a stylized sun, half eclipsed, a symbol of both light and loss. At the city gates, the scouts who had manned the western wall stared outward, stunned. Where once the Blightlands had stretched toward Dreadspire, there was now a crystalline canyon with rivers of glowing orange mist. One scout stepped past the final stone of Enza's foundation. The ground crumbled beneath his foot, not into soil, but into a shimmering black void that pulled like water before hardening into strange petrified earth. Behind him, the city groaned. Pipes warped, towers leaned. Magic in the air surged wildly, crackling in gutters and lanterns. Even the ley lines beneath the cobblestone pulsed with chaotic rhythms. The arcane infrastructure of Enza, built meticulously over centuries, now strained under the weight of new laws, new physics. Magic had rules here, but they were unfamiliar and volatile. Somewhere in the Scholar's Quarter, an enchanted broom exploded. In the gardens of Saint Iliara, plants bloomed in fast forward, then withered, then bloomed again, cycling wildly. The world did not welcome them. That night, a false aurora curled across the skies, bands of green and violet energy rippling between the moons. Ress stood atop the wall, staring out at the impossible horizon. Fennec joined her, silent. "Is this the afterlife?" he finally asked.
No, this is worse. The dead don't have to rebuild.
The ember wings circled overhead, landing in designated roosts scattered across the spire. One dropped a scroll into Ress's hands. It bore no words, only a single glyph glowing with residual magic. She turned it over. Aetos' voice, encoded in the paper, spoke in a whisper only she could hear. "We are lost, but not defeated. Protect what remains. Catarana is not barren. Others may walk its broken paths. Find them. Unite them. This is not the end. Not for Enza, not for us." Ress closed her eyes. The scroll burst into flames and vanished. Behind her, the city lights flickered. Flickered, but did not go out. Ashes of Arendor, Part 3. Catarana Revealed. The days that followed were a haze of motion. Every hour brought new challenges. Homes along the outer rim collapsed as their foundations slid against the warped terrain. Magic surged unpredictably. Healing spells sometimes caused burns. Enchanted lights flared or refused to dim. Animals imported from Arendor's coasts panicked in their pens, howling at unseen forces beyond the walls. Children fell ill and recovered in minutes, only to fall ill again. And the sky, The sky refused to settle. It shifted hourly, bleeding from turquoise to umber to pitch black, dotted with stars that moved like drifting embers across a midnight lake. Sometimes, for minutes at a time, the city's shadows moved opposite their source. It became clear to the Vanguard that Enza had not simply moved. It had been folded into something other, a world with its own laws, its own rhythm. This was Catarana, a realm that had no name until the first explorers returned to give it one. In old Arendari, Catarana meant the place beyond meaning, a poetic choice and a warning. Captain Ress stood in the Grand Plaza as 3 Emberwings landed around her. The phoenixes shimmered in shifting hues, crimson, orange, and golden white, each carrying a scroll in their talons. Their arrival was no longer a novelty. They were now the lifeblood of communication across the expanding edge of civilization. Her fingers moved automatically, unrolling each scroll, reports from the Eastern Scouts. A forest of petrified trees that bled smoke when cut. A frozen lake that reflected a sky different from the one above. A ruin, impossibly ancient, half merged with the jagged mountains, with architecture reminiscent to Arendari temples. The last one made her blood run cold. Vitrix had not followed. No trace of her dread forces remained, but something had once lived here, and perhaps still did. She passed the scrolls to the archivist nearby and turned toward the rising scaffolds and survey stations along the city's edge. Dozens of engineers and mages worked tirelessly to establish a perimeter, not as a wall, but a bridge. One that could connect Enza to whatever remnants of civilization this world still offered. In the days following the severing, the Radiant Vanguard had split into 3 branches. The Seekers, explorers and lore masters tasked with uncovering the truth of Catarana and searching for traces of other displaced civilizations. The Sentinels, guardians and warriors who patrolled the wilds and kept the growing population of magical beasts and anomalies at bay. The Hearthwards, clerics, artificers, and enchanters charged with keeping the city habitable and safe, stabilizing magic where they could. They were few, but they were enough, for now. Beyond the walls, reality bent. A few miles east, a floating island hovered over a valley, chained to the earth by glistening tendrils of light. Waterfalls poured from its edges, rising in reverse into thunderclouds that rained upward. One Vanguard expedition reached its base. Only one member returned, speaking of mirrored ruins, whispering statues, and a figure cloaked in time itself. South of Enza, a herd of 6-legged beasts grazed on stone, their skin covered in living runes. They glowed when approached, and one exploded violently when struck by an arrow. Even the very ground was uncertain. The Vanguard surveyors documented shifting terrain, valleys that rose overnight, stone paths that looped endlessly back to the beginning. Stable land was a relative term, but they pushed forward, marking and mapping what they could, using enchanted cairns and ever-burning beacons. In the city's archives, Scholar Junia pieced together notes from dozens of explorers. Catarana wasn't a world, it was a convergence. A place where displaced pieces of reality torn from their homes collided, like flotsam in a cosmic tide. Enza was not alone. Ress watched as the first beacon tower was completed. A shimmering spire of enchanted crystal and obsidian casting pulses of light into the sky like a lighthouse calling across dimensions. If there were others out there, perhaps they would see it. The Wall of Echoes had been raised beside the city's quest board, a public repository of warnings, findings, and declarations written by explorers and residents. Some were grim. Avoid the shardwood. Time flows backward at its heart. Stone giants east of the river. Peaceful unless provoked. Do not trust voices from Hollow Glen. They are not yours. Others were helpful. Met traders from a shattered sky vessel. Language unknown, but friendly. Signs of plant life similar to Arendari drift vines, possibly useful for potion work. And then, most chilling of all, saw a tower today, floating, metallic, not built by hands. Ress ran her fingers along the board, feeling the etched words like scars. They weren't just surviving, they were documenting, learning, enduring. A gentle cry overhead pulled her from her thoughts. Another Emberwing soared past, trailing firelight. It looped twice over the plaza before diving toward the Aurelian Spire, the only place it ever roosted now. There were no new messages, just a ritual, a morning flight. Perhaps even the birds remembered. Rest turned to the crowd gathering below the plaza's fountain, where a young girl had drawn chalk constellations on the stone. They didn't match the stars above, but they weren't random either. Junia had said something about patterns, about Catarana rearranging itself, drawing things together, not randomly, but with purpose. Rest stepped back, watched the girl's drawing, watched the Emberwings circle above. The world had changed, but Enza remained, and that was enough. Ashes of Arendor, Part 4, New Mission. The city held its breath as the council gathered. Within the vaulted hall of the citadel, the surviving leaders of Enza convened under stained glass windows that now glowed with foreign light. What once depicted scenes of Arendari saints and river gods now shimmered in distorted hues, warping the art into near abstraction, yet no one had the heart to replace them. Captain Rest stood at the center dais, flanked by High Artificer Bellin, Seer Helrix of the Dreaming Choir, and Scholar Junia. The hall was packed, officers, spellwrights, civic leaders, even merchants and smiths. In Enza's new reality, everyone had earned a seat at the table. For 3 days they had argued. Should they attempt to recreate the spell, search for Aetos' lost notes, try to return? But the truth stood before them undeniable. There was no clear way back, no confirmation that Arendor even remained. And Enza still stood. The time for mourning was not over, but the time for purpose had begun. Rest stepped forward and spoke, her voice steady and resonant.
We were warriors, defenders, guardians of the realm that may no longer exist. But the world has not ended. It has only changed. We were chosen to survive, and so we must choose to live.
Silence followed, then slowly, nods, murmurs, agreement. Then Seer Halrix lifted a gloved hand. This land speaks, she said, not in words, but in signs. Aetos' final act was not random. We were sent here, perhaps because we can survive it, because we can make sense of it. Scholar Junia took the floor next. She rolled out a new map, not of Arendor, but of Catarana, at least the small sliver they had charted. It was more art than cartography, symbols for anomaly zones, sketched hazards, colored blotches where reality thinned, but it was growing.
We recorded 8 zones of interest, 4 anomalies that repeat across different distances, 1 potential ley line, though it moves, and at least 2 fragments of other civilizations, possibly sentient.
She circled a cluster of distant dots. We are not alone. That evening, the Vanguard held a ritual atop the beacon tower, a memorial and a rededication. They lit floating lanterns, thousands, each bearing the name of someone lost in the siege or the severing. The lights drifted upward into the fractured sky, becoming new stars among the chaos. Rest stood before her soldiers as the final lanterns rose.
We do not know what brought us here. We may never know, but we have strength. We have memory, and we have duty. Not just to the past, but to what may come. Let Enza be more than a remnant. Let it be the beginning.
With those words, she drew her sword and plunged it into the obsidian of the tower's altar. It flared with radiant light, casting a line into the heavens. A flare of invitation, a warning to monsters, and a beacon to the lost. In the following weeks, Enza transformed. The Wall of Echoes became a central hub of knowledge and survival. Every citizen contributed, not just soldiers and mages, but cooks, builders, traders, children. Messages were carved daily. New herbs found, called glassvine, edible after boiling. The hollow glen's voices follow dreams now, avoid sleeping nearby. A stranger was seen by the southern ridge, eyes like stars. Non-hostile, though. Emberwings flew farther than ever, carrying coded scrolls embedded with illusions, sense, and song. Anything that might preserve clarity across distances warped by Catarana's shifting laws. The Radiant Vanguard was reborn. Their tabards bore a new symbol, the sun half-eclipsed, rimmed in flame, above a bridge of stone, a tribute to Aetos and a promise. Their tenets remained the same, but they had evolved. Seek the lost, map the unknown, protect all who struggle in the dark. and then carved beneath these a new line. So long as one lantern burns, Enza endures. 1 month after the severing, a tremor shook the earth outside the southern gates. Guards rushed toward the walls, weapons drawn, expecting beasts or storms or worse. What they saw was a caravan, ramshackle wagons drawn by horned beetles, survivors in layered cloaks and strange armor, eyes wide with fear and hope. Some bore relics, clearly not of Enza, weapons of glass, crystalline charms, scrolls bound in silk. Displaced folk from another world, another time, another fragment of some long-lost reality. The Vanguard opened the gates without hesitation, and Enza gained its first allies in the place beyond meaning, Catarana. Epilogue. Atop the Aurelian spire, the cradle of stars had gone dark, until one night a single ember flared. No spell, no explosion, just a flicker. Then another. Then a slow, pulsing rhythm like a heartbeat waiting to be heard. The rune Aetos left behind glowed faintly, no longer a symbol of death, but of awakening, and the city watched the horizon, not in fear, but anticipation. For the story of Enza was no longer about survival. It was about becoming something new. If you guys liked this, we plan to do a lot more, even if they don't really catch on right away. I think that someone might enjoy it. And it's good practice for me and Alex to kind of just like story tell and do some fun voice work stuff too. So yeah, let us know if you got anything you want us to make short stories of, or if you have short stories of your own that you'd like to give us to read, we can do that too. But anyway, thank you guys. Appreciate you. Have a good one.